Okay then, so if we move on to introduce our speaker for you tonight. So Sean is a good friend of mine, and I've managed to persuade him to come on here and give us a bit of a talk. So if I just run through his bio then. So Sean spent 15 years in the Royal Marines and serving in high-risk environments. His service time came to an end in 2020, and Support One Group, which is a company he currently runs, was born in early 2021. He started his training and development company, qualified at various levels in 3 separate subjects: first aid, mental health and safeguarding. His experience in his military career has been a valuable asset in enhancing the training delivered in all these areas. So he holds qualifications in teaching, MVQ assessing, and from CMI in management, leadership and coaching, mentoring, and completing project management qualification from APM. This provided him with a solid foundation, knowledge and skills needed to create and develop Support One Group. So he plans and manages the long-term goals of his company. Since launching, he has worked alongside other organisations such as charities, consultancies and youth organisations to aid in achieving their targets in health and safety requirements. Most recently, he has delivered and continues to deliver courses at Amazon, working with Citizens Advice, looking at their long-term future training. So looking ahead, he develops bespoke training in being developed for the education sector and teacher training days, and he's got that project to be implemented in April 2023 across schools in the Midlands. So that being said, without further ado, Sean, are you there?
Hi, I'm here, Dan. Yeah.
Hi, Sean. Yeah, if you want to get your presentation for us, then please.
Lovely. Can everybody see the presentation first of all? It should be a picture of a badge that says Royal Marines Commando on it.
Yes, we've got that on. Sean, thank you very much.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for inviting me to talk on your launch. And so what I'm going to talk about is self-discipline in risk management, and certainly from my perspective anyway, given my experience in the armed forces. I'm going to give across 4 principles which are what we apply when we teach people how to shoot their rifles, okay, in order to be able to hit their target. Now, I know this might sound very military, but you can apply these principles to everything that you do in life. And I've applied them since I left the Royal Marines in 2020, and they've been a key factor in helping me develop my business. It's only been going 18 months and we're doing pretty well. So whenever I struggle, I always revert back to these 4 principles, and they help me realize perhaps where I'm going wrong. Why do these principles stick in my mind? And that comes back to an event that is cemented in my mind from 2008 during my first operational tour in Afghanistan. And I will also share that with you towards the end of the presentation as well. Please forgive me if I either laugh as I'm telling you about this event, or I sound like I'm getting a little bit choked up. I will try to refrain from doing that, but it's not something I speak about very often. As Dan mentioned, where have I served? So 15 years in the Royal Marines in lots of different environments. And as I say that, what a time for my PowerPoint to not work.
You could try clicking on it twice, Dan, and it might move forward. Sean, sorry. Can you see? There we go.
Okay, I can see it now. So this is in the NAG, the North Arabian Gulf. Okay, we were training Iraqi naval officers to conduct combatant and non-combatant boardings on boats, and you can see we were working alongside the Americans there. That was when I was in my early 20s. In 2010, again in my mid-20s, Arctic warfare training and all of the risk management and the hazards that come with that. And just so you know, that water was extremely cold. Okay, it took me about 40 minutes to tie my shoelaces after getting out there. And this is a photograph of myself about 2 months into my first operational tour in 2008. So after all this, what do I do now? A little bit like Dan mentioned, I run a training and development company called Support One Group. I focus on three main areas: the first aid, the mental health, and the safeguarding, because they are the three main areas that I learned within my experience that help people in some way, shape, or form. Everybody can benefit from it. And so this is where I focus my attention for the business. Straight into the principles then. Okay, the first one, please forgive my spelling if anybody spots any spelling mistakes. But when we talk about going to shoot a rifle, okay, this very first principle is fundamental in actually hitting your target. So the position and hold, it must be firm enough to support your weapon. How do I apply this in everyday life and business and in risk management areas? Okay, how do I decide whether to take the decision? So the position that I'm in, okay, is it firm enough? This is another photograph of myself. Okay, you'll notice that my legs, they're in a triangle shape, they're stable. I can sustain myself in that position for a prolonged period of time. I have protection, okay, and I also have knowledge of the risk. And in this case, it is my weapon system that is the risk. Once I've fired once I've squeezed the trigger, okay, I can't control anything after that. So after your decision has been made, the consequences are kind of no longer in your hands. So these principles, they fall fundamentally in making sure we get the decision right. The position that you're in, if you are not stable and you squeeze the trigger, i.e. you make a decision, all right, that decision can have great effect. It can knock you off balance and put you in a worse position, okay? When it does that, you are not in a sustainable position, so you can't prolong whatever activity you're doing. And so how would you apply this to your business? You could apply it in a financial management manner. You could apply it in a time scale manner, but you must understand what position you're in before you make any other decision. Okay, where are you? Where do you want to be? Are you in the right place? The second principle, okay, is the weapon must point naturally at the target without any undue physical effort. So within making a decision when it comes to measuring risk, okay, is it a necessary risk? Is it worth it? What are the benefits? And also, am I in a good position? Am I in the right position? Am I pointing my weapon system or my idea or my objective, okay, or my project in a natural direction? Okay, it must be natural. If it's forced, okay, once we begin to force things, things begin to go wrong. Okay, we tend to get pushed from pillar to post. So the weapon, it must point in a natural direction. And as you can see on there, the last sub-point of that principle is, are you balanced? I put that in there because if you don't get the first principle correct, i.e. your position and hold must be firm enough to support whatever you're doing, the other principles, they fall out of line. And as one begins to fall and then the other falls, okay, the effect compounds to the point where you do not achieve your objective. In shooting, it's hitting the target, okay? In other risk management and in life and in business, it could be other things. The third principle then, the sight and picture alignment must be correct, okay? Now, what we're talking about here is how do you view what you're looking at? What is your perception of it? So you can see here we have two separate sights. Okay, one is a sniper scope pointing just above some trees, and then the other one is a small arms weapon system like you saw me holding, pointing at somebody else. Now, with my experience, I know that the bottom picture, although it's pointing at somebody, I know that round is going to miss. And I know this because there is a shadow at the top of the sight and not at the bottom, which means that their perception of what they're seeing isn't actually correct. Okay, so with the physics and the way the round falls, all right, it will miss the target even though the sight is pointing at it. So within life and business, and like I say, you must be clear on what you're viewing. And also, is your target within range? Do you actually have the tools in order to achieve what you want to? If you do have the tools, do you have enough of them? If you don't have them, it's a case of, do you have the resource of finance in order to provide them? I.e., a small arms weapon system cannot shoot, okay, as far or as accurate as a sniper rifle. And the last point there, does your vision align with what you see? So you may get so far into a project and you may think, do you know what, this is not turning out the way I thought it was, even though the other two principles have been achieved effectively. And so at this point, you can kind of decide either to change. In the military terms, you could change weapon systems, or in life terms, you can just change directions, or like most projects, just stop and come to an end. The fourth and final principle then is the shot must be released and followed through without disturbance to the position. Now, this is really key. Sorry, this is really key because if the other principles are not correct and been followed in order, then your final part, okay, will fall down, and again, you will not hit the target. So what you can see in front of you now is a friend of mine. Okay, that's not me firing. We're on the same ship as the first photograph, and he's firing an M4 rifle. He's on automatic and he's firing 2 burst rounds. But you'll see actually that his body position doesn't change a great deal because he's applied all of the principles. And I'll just play that for you now. Okay, so his position and hold was firm enough to support the weapon. That weapon barely moved, all right? His weapon was pointed naturally at the target, easy in this circumstance, he's pointing out to sea. His sight and picture alignment is correct, okay? His view, his distance from his eye to his sight is a good distance, he's looking objectively, okay, and still has peripheral vision on things as opposed to being tunneled with his vision. Right, and then the final decision to squeeze the trigger. And when he does squeeze the trigger, he is in full control of every risk that that weapon system poses to him. It's also deliberate. Nothing slips. He decides, he takes action, and he executes. The consequences of him squeezing the trigger are understood. These become apparent as you go throughout the principles. All right, and then the final action is the result that you aim for in general. So in military terms, it's immobilizing enemy combatants, or in life or in business, it's a case of you've succeeded in what you want to do. So this isn't the best picture, but it's actually the only one I could find. This is a picture of a patrol base in Afghanistan. It's called PB Wishton. It's not very big, okay? Although it's a lovely building, it's not very big at all. There was anywhere between 20 and 35 of us that lived in this building at any one time. All right. I've had to draw a little map, so again, excuse my my drawings, but to give you an idea, okay, if my cursor shows up on your screen, I hope it does. This is the outside wall of the compound that we lived in, and this is the building in which you've just seen. These blue rectangles, they're guard posts, for a better word. There's a guard in each one, and then we've got one that sits on top of the building that we called the crow's nest. The smally red line here is an entry and exit point, and then this one here is the main entry and exit point. You've got building 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this area here, to put it into a bit of perception, is about the size of a 5-a-side football pitch. Your squiggly lines, okay, is actually barbed wire. This is where we sealed off some of the roads and the alleyways. They're not very wide, maybe 8 to 10 feet, okay, all of the roads that surrounding us, but the walls were about 8 to 10 feet high also. The walls were only about 6 to 8 inches thick, and when you consider that Patrol Base Wishton was it was very secluded. my cursor's, here it is. So this arrow here, okay, it represents a road. Now this road is called Pharmacy Road, and at the time in 2008/2009, it was the most heavily IED'd road in the world. It was only about 70 to 90 meters long, and it boomeranged in the middle. But because of all the high walls of the buildings, it was very hard to look down it. There was a patrol base at the other end, but the bend in the middle was a big problem for us. There was just no way of us actually being able to keep eyes on without keeping people outside of the security perimeter. So to give you a little bit more of an idea of how shallow our security was, this gate, the red gate here, it was made up of corrugated iron that we'd nailed together with 2x4, and it was propped up with 2x4. And so in order to access our building or our compound in general, if they were smart, well, not smart enough, that's the wrong words, if they were organized enough, they would have been able to overrun us without a problem. Okay, so these funky shapes, okay, these are the angles in which these security guards, if you like, are in control of. Okay, this is where they look, and of course the one in the middle looks 360. This is a main road. This road actually stretches, I think, for about 200 miles. It's called the 611, and it's that lots of traffic goes up and down this road. So late 2008, early 2009, okay, it was a winter tour. It must have been about, I don't know, between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning. It was early hours, and I'm sat just in this guard post here, and I'm watching my ops. Okay, like most nights when you're on duty, if I'm brutally honest, now I can be, I'm a little bit older, it was highly boring. Okay, because when nothing happens, you get a little bit lazy, right? Not many former soldiers would admit that to you, but we do get lazy. However, in the pitch black of night, it just happened to be one of those nights where there's no ambient light, so your night vision doesn't work. I heard a noise that came from behind me, came from down this alleyway here, and I'm facing this way. Now this noise, even though I wasn't moving, it made me freeze because they were footsteps. I knew they were footsteps, and they were only 8–10 feet behind me, and noise travels at night. The reason it shook me up so much is because nothing should come from this way, because I've got to guard this side, okay, watching all these avenues, and there's barbed wire, of which if something was to go through, you should have been able to hear. But without a doubt, there was footsteps here. In my sort of realization of what they were, as I'm kind of waiting, I'm still in disbelief. And then I heard the footsteps again, and they creeped a little bit closer. And I could even work out how many people there was, and there were 2. So now we have no friendly forces out on the ground. I hear footsteps behind me over to my left-hand side, over a wall that is no taller than 8 to 10 feet and not very thick. Footsteps that really should not have been there. They creep up right to my left-hand side. Now, if you can imagine, this noise is now no further than 3 or 4 feet away from me. Okay, I've taken the safety catch off my weapon system. I've got up off my seat, and I've gone to take a knee on the floor. Okay, still facing the same direction. I'm still in disbelief at what I can hear, and at this point, my heart, I thought, was going to break my rib cage. It was pounding that much. I try and radio the other guards, but because I'm so close, I couldn't speak. So every time you click the pressel, it makes a noise in your ear. So I'm frantically clicking this pressel to try and get somebody's attention. But all this time, these footsteps, they've just stopped. They've moved, and then they'd stopped. And I got no response from the radio. So I'm now assuming that they've come from this direction. The guard in this post is immobilized, okay? They've managed to get through the barbed wire, and now they're sneaking up and making their way round. And I'm next. At this point, okay, the steps, they move again. And now when they move, excuse me, I've lost my cursor. Now when they move round, and now they're directly in front of me, okay? And they stop again. Definitely 2 sets of steps, definitely 2 people, absolutely sure. I turn myself 180 degrees. So now I'm facing back this way, and I put my back against the wall. The idea behind this was if they was to fire over the top of the wall, the rounds would just go straight over my head, and they would miss. Because they're so close, and I'm convinced there's 2 of them, I put my weapon to one side, still with my safety catch off, and I take a grenade out of my pocket. There are 2 safety features on a grenade. One's called a transit clip, and the other one is, like you see in the films, the pin that you pull out. I took the first safety feature off, which was the transit clip, and I put my finger in the pin, but I didn't pull it. And then I start hearing heavy breathing, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go, they're coming. Okay, they're just as nervous as I am, and they're coming over the top. But in this very same moment, I thought, I can't drop the grenade over the wall because I'm too close and I'll end up harming myself. And in my nerves, I didn't even put the grenade back in my pocket. I actually put it on the floor. So I put the grenade on the floor and I left it, and I got hold of my weapon system again. Perhaps, in fact, it was my naivety looking back. I had to look. Okay, so my weapon is now firmly in my grasp. The back end of the weapon is pushed into my shoulder, my safety catches off, and my finger is on the trigger. And I know I'm about to come face to face with 2 enemy combatants. And as I'm sure you can imagine, I was not in a good way emotionally at this point. And I'm shaking talking about it. In my naivety, I had to check. I kind of lift my head, peer over my left shoulder, and have a quick glimpse over the wall. I don't know why I did it, I just did. And as I go to glimpse over the wall, I see what looks like somebody, looks like a sock that's just wafted in the air in the darkness. Couldn't see anything else, it just looked like a sock. I know that might sound a bit silly, but that's the only way I can describe it. In my sheer horror, I actually bend back down behind the wall, and now I'm shaking even more. I'm sure I must have bruised a rib, you know, with my heart coming through my chest. And I think, right, okay, you've got to go. You need to take the initiative, and you need to get there before they get you. As I go over the top to confront these 2 enemy combatants, I go very slowly, reminding myself that my weapon is firmly in my shoulder. How am I going to stand? How am I going to twist? I knew not to look through my sights because that would narrow my vision, and so I needed to look over the top of my sights because they were so close. Okay. As I do this, I see a second sock, and in sheer fear, I did not go over the top of the wall. I bent back down, and in my nervousness, as I went back down, I scraped the back of my body armor against the wall as I went to slump on the floor. And that, of course, made a noise, and then I heard footsteps. And then in that moment, I went straight over the wall, pointed my weapon system, and I took up the first pressure of my trigger. You have 2 pressures on the trigger. I took up the first pressure, I look over my sights, and there it was, okay? Fortunately, I did not discharge my weapon, I didn't fire it, and nobody was hurt. It turned out that it was a donkey. Okay, it was not 2 enemy combatants, and what I heard was two sets of footsteps. And as I come over the wall, this donkey kind of just trottles off into the open ground with about 8–10 feet of rope being dragged behind it. So it had clearly chewed through its restraint and just went about its business. I can't tell you the relief at that point. I'm pretty sure I shed a tear to myself as well. The bottom lip may have come out, along with some other bodily functions. But what did I take away from that, and how does that coincide with the marksmanship principles? Well, I applied them all. The position that I was in was fundamental in me being able to execute my actions should I have carried them out the whole way. Okay, I knew exactly where they were. I knew what direction I was going to turn and what angle to kind of point my weapon system at. That applies the second principle. I knew I couldn't look through my sights. I was convinced that they were enemy combatants, and given our area of operations that we were working in, it was quite likely that they were enemy combatants as well. So I choose to look over the top of the sights. There's the third principle checked. And then the fourth one, I took 99.9% of the way there. I just didn't squeeze that final pound of pressure. But throughout all of this, and regardless of how nervous I was well prepared to live. I knew that I would be able to gain the upper hand, and it all came down from training essentially. We repeat stuff all of the time in the military, over and over and over again, and quite often it can get a little bit boring, and we pay lip service to it. Well, I can promise you, ladies and gents, I never paid lip service to the marksmanship principles after this event. And ever since, in 2009, when we came home and I went on to train young Marines and other members of the armed forces, that I absolutely hammered home these principles. And I convinced people that one day, okay, these principles, they will make you successful. Not necessarily save your life. You might not be in that situation, and hopefully, you know, the majority, all of the people of the world aren't, but unfortunately some of us are. But you will succeed in what you're trying to achieve. So that's my little story about the most that I've ever been afraid, and I can honestly say that I've never been as afraid since. Okay. And nor do I make silly mistakes as actually looking over the wall, looking back. I should have just went over and discharged my weapon. So as a quick recap, the 4 principles then. What position are you in? Do you have a good grasp of it? Do you understand where you are? And are you in a position to be able to move forward in what you want to achieve? Because without that solid platform, the other principles are going to fall down. Principle 2, point naturally at the target. Where you're going, have you got to force it? If you have, perhaps rethink, okay, what your objective is and what you're aiming for. Your sight and picture alignment. Are we talking imagination? Are we talking realism? Do you have the right support? Have you got the right systems in place? Have you carried out the correct risk assessments to the best of your ability? And then the 4th one is essentially the decision, the final decision, the go, no go. It can be pulled at last minute, as I explained and demonstrated, without taking up that final pressure. But before you do squeeze that trigger with anything, you know, we have to think of the consequences as well. And with the consequences, I look back and I think, what would have happened if I pulled the pin on the grenade and dropped it over the wall? Well, the donkey would have unfortunately lost its life. I may have been harmed in the process, but I don't believe that I would have been incapacitated through it. I'd have had protection from the wall. But I would have been known as the young Marine, okay, who killed a donkey right outside the base in a secluded area in the middle of Sangin province, Afghanistan, and the stench would have been horrific. They'd have made me clean the mess up most likely by myself as a mild punishment, as if to go, you silly Billy. No killing donkeys by accident. Okay. So that you know, kind of would have been the consequences. But on the flip side, if they were what I thought they were, and they were two enemy combatants, perhaps looking back, I left it too long to go over the wall and engage. So we'll never know, but that's what I take away from it. All down to your training, okay, applying those 4 principles. Where can we go wrong? So as you can see here, we've got a lad. I do know this lad, he's a good mate of mine. He's sat on top of a rooftop as we're out on patrol, yawning, not behind his weapon system. It's complacency. And why do I sort of bring this up when I talk about the principles and, you know, and training? So I now work in a training world. This is what I do. Training gets dry, it gets repetitive, and people lose interest. The amount of first aid courses that I teach and the sad look on my learners' faces when they realize that they're on a first aid course is quite demoralizing as an instructor sometimes, because they say it's just another first aid course, been here before, every 3 years. And when you get those looks on people when you're carrying out your training, that's a good hint that perhaps we should either step it up a little bit, get more involved, or change the program to achieve the same objectives, but perhaps in a different way that keeps people more engaged. And in my short period in the civilian world, in the training world as well, that seems to be apparent. I've attended a few training courses myself, and some of them were so dire that I ended up rewriting the courses, doing the research and rewriting them. Okay, and then presenting them accordingly. All right. So they're my 4 principles. They are essentially how I manage risk day in, day out, and I apply them as and where I can in order to meet either my objectives or to kind of ground myself a little bit. And I certainly try not to get complacent. I change my courses every 12 months. I'm in the process of changing them all currently. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my donkey story as much as I perhaps feared it 12 years ago now, 14 years ago now. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you for that, Sean. I was on the edge of my seat and I wondered where the laugh would come in until the end. So that was pretty obvious. We do have a couple of questions, actually. So the first one, this is an interesting one. Did you believe there was more risk being on the front line or setting up your own business?
Oh, setting up my own business. Without a shadow of a doubt. When it comes to fear, I've never been more afraid than what I was that night. But when it comes to stress, I have never been in a more stressful environment than setting up my own business.
That's an interesting answer, that one is. Thank you. And then the next question is, just before I read this question, if anyone's got any more questions for Sean, if you want to pop them in now whilst I'm reading this last question. When completing a project, how often do you revisit the principles to ensure they are still aligned?
Oh, all the time. So projects change all the time. I only set out to do 3 main subjects in terms of support one group, and that was first aid, mental health and safeguarding. As things have developed, we now teach seizures, we teach autism in adults, we teach medication handling for care homes, manual handling. I'm now looking at expanding into the health and safety world over the next 6 months as well. And so none of this was part of the original plan. It just seems to be people asking if we're available to do other stuff. So the principles then get reapplied. I've been asked to cover a care home company that covers 3,000 employees. There's only me and 2 staff. And so again, before I say yes, I can, I have to go back to the first principle. What position am I in? Have I got the infrastructure to fulfill their needs? If I don't have it, can I get it? And when I can get it, because you can always get it, you know, what's my time scale on doing that? And I kind of have to answer this question, the first principle, before I even move on to the others. Is it something I want to go into, as an example? So to answer your question, I revisit them all the time. Yeah, all the time, at least once a week.
That's great. Thank you for that. I love how you apply what you've learned in the military to your new business. So we've got another question for you. Is there any way to prepare for when things don't go to plan? That's an interesting one as well.
Yes. So you always prepare for the worst and hope for the best. And in military terms, we're very fortunate in that in the military, 95% of your world is training. Yeah, so we train for all sorts of weird and wonderful scenarios. So firstly, training. But then secondly, always acknowledge that nothing ever goes to plan. Yeah, nothing ever goes to plan. You can set out a timeline for a project, and at some point during that project, there'll be a spanner thrown in the works and nothing will go to plan. So my advice would be, as much as you're training, do things on an extreme level that really put you out of your comfort zone, that really put you in a position to go, I have to make a decision. I can't wait. Yeah. And it might be something along the lines of, so example, the APM project management course. I saw on Babcock recruitment site that there was a 5-year apprenticeship, and after 3 years you got the APM qualification. I didn't know this at the time, but I just finished doing the APM project management course, and I did it in a lot less a time than 3 years. I actually did it across the course of 10 days, and I was fortunate enough to pass the exam. But I must say, it was the hardest thing that I've ever done, to consume that much knowledge and write it in a way that the examiners want and to pass, all inside of 10 days. But if you're going to go, I'll do stage 1 first, and then stage 2, and then stage 3, you kind of, in my experience, you've always become reliant upon your plans. And sometimes you just got to throw yourself in to teach yourself actually that you're capable of a lot more than what you think.
Great, thank you for that. We're getting some great questions tonight. So the next one is, what would you advise for people struggling with their business to keep being motivated and not lose the target from sight? I like that question.
Okay, so I had to give some of this advice to a friend actually only last week. And so the first thing I said to him, I went back to the first principle, which was all about support. And I asked him what support he had in terms of family life. You know, you can't do anything by yourself. You need support, whether that's financial support from a bank, or you've just had a bad day and you need support from the partner when they're at home, or they need to understand that you're not at home as much as what you might want to be. So support. So when you're down in the dumps and you don't feel as though it's going well, go back to the first principle. Yeah, what position are you in? Have you bit off more than you can chew initially, and maybe actually take a step back? Taking a step back is not a bad thing. Okay, taking a step back is a good thing. I always view it like hopscotch. Take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. But support. So if you're feeling stressed, go and find somebody that you feel supports you, and even if that's ringing the Samaritans. I rang the Samaritans about a year ago, and I was down in the dumps. I thought I was failing, and I just had a conversation with somebody. Nothing to do with ill mental health or anything like that. I just thought the support network I have around me is support, but it wasn't the right support for what I needed at the time. So I looked elsewhere, and I ended up calling the Samaritans. So that would be my advice.
Thank you for sharing that very personal anecdote with us. So we've got the last question, then we've got a laugh at the end and then some compliments as well. So someone is asking, can you apply these principles to accident and incident investigation?
To answer the question accurately, I think I would have to be more involved within the accident and investigation world. I've not done a great deal of it, okay? However, what might perhaps relate is after a firefight, or there's been an explosion, or someone was injured, we always had what we called an after action review, which is where we went through everything that happened out on the ground to kind of see where we went wrong. And I might be incorrect in this, but I can see how that perhaps might tie in with accident investigation. And we do always go back to the principles. So we applied it here. This happened. This went wrong. You know, were we in the right position? And that's the best way I can kind of answer it. So I would say yes, but to give a more accurate answer, I'd have to be more involved in that world.
That's a fair and honest answer. Thank you for that. So we've had a question here, which is making me laugh. I'll try and read it without laughing. In terms of health and welfare, would you recommend using animals as a support aid, perhaps donkeys?
Perhaps donkeys. I'd love to know. Well, I don't think that donkey's around anymore, but I'm sure it lived a very healthy, happy life after it trotted off. I do think animal welfare is really good. I'm looking at getting a dog myself, but again, as I keep going back to it, I'm not in a position to have a dog. I spend too much time on the road, so it would be neglectful for me to get a pet. However, I do feel as though if I did have a dog, it would relieve a lot of stress for me. And I believe there's a lot of evidence as well to say that pets do help people with their mental well-being and mental health.
I think you're spot on there. I do have a dog, a 9-month-old puppy, and she's very good for my mental and physical welfare, that's for sure. So that's the end of the questions. We've got some feedback here for you. Absolutely excellent, brilliant presentation. Thank you for sharing. So I think it's been a cracking presentation. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Dan, do you want to come back on to give closing comments, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, cheers, Sean. That was that was great. And like I say, in my mind's eye, I was trying to picture, you know, with the visual you had on the screen, just picture in my mind's eye what were these two socks you kept seeing. And so
there was donkey's ears.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, then you jumped over the wall and realised it.
His ears. Yeah.
Ears, but I don't think you've ever told me that one, to be fair. But
no,
that was great.
I keep it to myself.
I'll remember that for years to come. But yeah, Sean, look, I know I sort of got you to do this, and it's the first time you've done it, and I think you've done a brilliant job. I'm sure, you know, you'll get some visits to your site and whatnot, and more questions maybe. But look, thanks a lot. Thanks for putting the time and the effort into coming on tonight, and all the preparation that you've done beforehand. It's really good, and you've done like I said, you've done a brilliant job. Thanks so much.
Cool. Cheers, Dan.
No worries, mate. So I'd also like to thank anyone that's joined tonight, or anyone that would, you know, is going to view this in the future on YouTube or whatnot. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us on our relaunch night and webinar. All the best.
Thank you, Dan. If anybody would like to contact Sean, if you just email me at branches@IIRSM.org, I'd be happy to pass on his details for you. Just a reminder, the recording will be on the IIRSM YouTube channel in the next day or two, and those of you wanting attendance certificates, they will come out automatically this time tomorrow. So I'd like to thank Sean for your brilliant presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'd like to thank the East Midlands Branch Committee for giving up your valuable time to run the branch on behalf of your members. And we hope to see you at the next East Midlands Branch webinar. Please keep your eye out on the LinkedIn page and on the website for the next meeting. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.